Diesel piston engines might just be the future of general aviation, at least in the short to medium term. It's a bold claim, so stick around and I'll provide some objective arguments as to why the removal of lead from Avgas effectively sealed the fate of Avgas-powered aviation engines, and why diesel aero engines could dominate the skies in the years to come. Leaded fuel started being phased out for automotive use during the 1970s, with a complete ban in place by 1996 in the US and 2000 in Europe. Yet, a quarter of a century later, it remains widely used in general aviation. It makes sense when you consider that most light aircraft engine designs trace back to the 1940s and 50s, when engines were designed specifically for leaded fuel. That said, the development of unleaded aviation fuel has been underway for over a decade. Notable examples are Swift 94UL and Gammy's G100UL, the latter of which has been in development since 2010 and achieved a major breakthrough in 2022 when the FAA granted an STC for its use across the entire general aviation spark ignition engine fleet. That's despite some aircraft and engine manufacturers not explicitly approving its use, a situation that's opened up a big can of worms, which I'll get to shortly. Lead, or TEL, short for tetraethyl lead, was first added to aviation fuels in the 1920s to boost its octane rating, improving its resistance to detonation. By the late 1930s, the value of TEL was fully realized in the race to develop high-performance aero engines leading up to World War II. After the war, leaded Avgas became the standard fuel for general aviation, and still is today. We know lead is a dangerous neurotoxin, so its removal from aviation fuels is absolutely necessary. There is no debate about that. What the debate is about is just how significant a challenge this poses for general aviation. Without lead, the octane rating of Avgas needs to be maintained through other means, usually by using aromatic hydrocarbons with naturally high detonation resistance, advanced refining techniques, stricter quality control, and in some cases additional octane boosting additives. This is followed by thousands of hours of testing to ensure the new fuel doesn't damage the engines, fuel tanks, fuel system components, sealants or rubbers used in the few 100,000 Avgas-powered general aviation aircraft around the world. In October 2023, the University of North Dakota's flight school started long-term testing of Swift 94UL. With nearly 100 aircraft in their fleet, this was a significant commitment toward large-scale public testing of unleaded Avgas. However, less than 6 months into the trial, testing was abruptly halted, with UND citing evidence of significant valve seat recession in their Lycoming engines as the reason. This came as a shock to many, especially considering that low-compression piston aero engines have run on high-octane, unleaded automotive gasoline for decades without problems. Nonetheless, this came as a stark reminder of reality, and that despite all the testing, some uncertainties were still very much in play. In another blow to unleaded Avgas, in mid-2024, Cirrus issued a service advisory stating that G100UL is not approved for use in their aircraft, and doing so could void engine warranties. That raised a serious legal question. Can manufacturers really void warranties for using unleaded Avgas when the FAA has already approved its use? All this consumer doubt is created around a product that, other than removing lead, does nothing to reduce overall CO2 emissions, while the general aviation sector remains a potential target for drastic emissions regulations. At the same time, 100LL is becoming scarcer and more expensive, a trend that will continue until it's no longer feasible to produce. So, the combination of 100 low lead availability, inevitable emissions regulations coming for general aviation, and the uncertainty surrounding unleaded Avgas is having the unintended side effect of effectively opening the door for diesel aero engines to gain a larger foothold in the general aviation market. And this isn't just my opinion. Aero engine manufacturers like Continental, Delta Hawk and a handful of others must have also thought along those lines more than a decade ago already when they heavily invested in diesel engines. Some will of course argue that electric or hydrogen power is the future of general aviation and is just around the corner. That might be the case 30 years from now, but I seriously doubt either will be feasible for general aviation in the next 10, probably 20 years. But do you know what is available right now? Is technologically feasible today? Solves the lead problem, solves the fuel availability problem, solves the fuel price problem, and even reduces emissions? If you're watching this, then you already know from the video title. It's diesel engines. When I mention diesel engines in this video, I'm referring to compression ignition piston engines that can run on either diesel fuel, like what you'd find at an automotive filling station, or jet fuel, a term that collectively refers to Jet A and Jet A1, the fuels used by airliners which is widely available at airports. One advantage of jet fuel over automotive diesel is its lower gelling point. Diesel fuel starts to gel at temperatures as high as minus 15 degrees Celsius, while, for example, Jet A1 doesn't gel until about minus 47 degrees Celsius, making it more suitable for high altitude operations. Both diesel and jet fuel are kerosene based and is safer to handle since it's less volatile than petrol. This property does dictate the design of diesel engines, which I'll dive into later in the video. Another key advantage of diesel engines is their wide compatibility with sustainable aviation fuels, which largely future-proof them. Let's address a key question. Why would diesel be the answer to general aviation when it's problematic in the automotive sector? While diesel engines produce less CO2 emissions than petrol engines, they do emit nitrogen oxides, or NOx, which are harmful to humans. This is a major concern in the automotive world, but it's much less of an issue in aviation. Airplanes fly high in the sky, far above where people are walking around and breathing in pollutants. Even at airports where planes take off and land, the localized impact is much smaller compared to the widespread NOx pollution caused by road traffic. Furthermore, NOx emissions can be further reduced with advanced particulate filter technology. To fully understand the real-life impact of the advantages and disadvantages of diesel engines, it may be helpful to briefly cover the design of diesel engines and how they operate. The main difference between petrol and diesel engines is how the fuel is ignited. Petrol engines are spark ignition engines, meaning they rely on a spark to ignite the air-fuel mixture. In contrast, diesel engines are compression ignition engines. They don't require a spark and instead fuel is injected directly into highly compressed and heated air, which then ignites. This offers several advantages. Since diesel engines pull only air into the combustion chamber, combustion can only start once fuel is injected. This means diesel engines don't have detonation issues and can achieve much higher compression ratios. In petrol engines, an air-fuel mixture is drawn into the combustion chamber, where it's compressed and heated. Ideally, combustion starts when the spark ignites the mixture. However, because compression heats the air-fuel mixture, with petrol being more volatile than diesel, the mixture can ignite before the spark if it's compressed and heated too much. This results in detonation that can damage the internal components. To prevent detonation, petrol engines have relatively low compression ratios, typically maxing out around 12:1, potentially up to 14:1 in ultra-modern direct injection automotive engines. Diesel engines, on the other hand, can have a compression ratio of up to 22:1. Another advantage of diesel engines is that, since they're compression ignition engines, they don't need spark plugs, magnetos, or electronic ignition systems. With fewer moving parts, diesel engines have fewer components that can fail, which enhances their overall reliability. The obvious advantage of diesel engines is its greater efficiency, thanks mostly to higher compression ratios. Additionally, diesel engines produce fewer carbon emissions. But it has its downsides too. Because diesel fuel can handle much higher compression ratios, they must be built more robustly to withstand the extreme pressures in the combustion chamber. This not only increases the engine's purchase cost, but also adds weight. Weight is the enemy of airplanes. In the automotive world, an additional 30 kilograms in the engine bay doesn't make much of a difference. But in the nose of a light aircraft, an additional 30 kilograms can be a deal breaker. However, there's another point that's rarely brought up in these discussions. Yes, diesel engines are heavier, but they're also more fuel efficient, meaning they burn less fuel. And since fuel has mass, using less of it means the aircraft needs to carry less weight in fuel. You can see in the calculations on screen that the longer the flight, the more the diesel engine's extra weight is offset. Of course, for short flights with just an hour of fuel as an example, very little of the engine's added weight is offset. But if a flight is long enough, the additional weight of many diesel engines are fully offset. Even so, it doesn't solve potential center of gravity issues, as a heavy engine can make an aircraft nose heavy with a very forward center of gravity. But this can usually be addressed fairly simply by mounting the engine further back, if possible, or adding a small amount of weight to the aircraft's tail with minimal impact to useful load. At this point, considering only the facts specifically mentioned, I believe diesel aero engines have the edge over petrol engines. But they come with a few more disadvantages not yet covered. One is that diesel engines are more susceptible to issues with cold starts. Since diesel ignition is temperature dependent, low ambient temperatures can make combustion more difficult to achieve at engine start. And perhaps more seriously, this also affects starting a dead engine in flight, but this is somewhat mitigated by the use of glow plugs. And of course, the limited STCs available for diesel retrofits on type certified planes doesn't help its case. Another hurdle for the growing diesel engine market is the need for mechanic and technician training. Mechanics certified to work on opposed air-cooled Avgas engines won't automatically have the know-how or be allowed to work on inline diesel engines. This means they'll need additional training, which could lead to a shortage of qualified mechanics in the short term. One somewhat common question that comes up is how these aero engines prevent or control diesel runaway.
Until?
Diesel runaway occurs when an engine begins drawing fuel from an unintended source, usually causing it to overspeed, often even after shutting down the engine. While certainly not impossible, the risk of diesel runaway is much lower in aircraft than in cars. This is due to several factors like fuel shut-off valves in the cockpit, advanced fuel control systems, electronic overspeed protection, and early warning through sophisticated engine monitoring systems. Systems more advanced than what you typically find in a car. Additionally, aircraft engines are subject to much stricter maintenance protocols than car engines, further reducing the likelihood of diesel runaway. One final point against diesel engines is the perception that they're in direct competition with electric and hydrogen power for the future of general aviation. This doesn't make much sense though. Diesel engines are a mature technology with a proven track record and is available right now. On the other hand, electric and hydrogen technologies are still in their infancy with many major challenges yet to be solved. Yes, electric airplanes seem to be everywhere lately, and some like the Veles Electro are even EASA and FAA approved for training. Electric power just isn't a realistic replacement for Avgas engines at the moment. Diesel engines, on the other hand, already meet the vast majority of use cases. Before diving into some of the available diesel aero engines on the market, here is a summarized list of the mentioned advantages and disadvantages of diesel engines compared to petrol engines in the context of aviation. Pause here if you'd like to go through it in detail. I won't cover every single one, but here are some notable diesel aero engines available. Perhaps the most well-known are the Mercedes automobile-based engines like the Continental CD135 and 155, which originated as the Thielert Centurion engines before Continental's parent company, Avic International, acquired Thielert. The 135 horsepower CD135 and 155 horsepower CD155 have STCs for popular airframes like the Cessna 172 and Piper P828, and they also power various Diamond aircraft models. Both engines are 2-liter, inline 4-cylinder, liquid-cooled, dual overhead cam, turbo diesel, gear-reduced engines. While not FAA certified, Thielert also built a 4-liter V8 diesel, which is not currently available from Continental as far as I know, but Continental does have a 300 horsepower 3-liter V6 option in the CD300. Then there's the Austro AE300, which is closely related to the Continental diesels. While it's also based on the Mercedes OM640 automotive engine, Austro has taken its own development path, meaning their engine isn't identical to Continental's versions. As an example of the different way these companies approach engine development and design philosophy, the Continental CD135 and 155 doesn't have a TBO or time between overhaul, but has a TBR or time between replacement of 2,100 hours or 12 years. The Austro AE300 on the other hand does have a TBO, which is 1,800 hours. So one can be overhauled and the other can't and needs to be replaced. The AE300, also a 2-liter inline 4, as expected, has a dry weight of 186 kilograms and makes 168 horsepower, which is quite different from Continental's version. As mentioned earlier, many companies have invested in diesel aero engines, and a company that thought about 25 years ago already that diesel is the future of general aviation is Delta Hawk. I've already made a dedicated video about this 2-stroke inverted V4 turbo and supercharged direct drive diesel engine. The engine keeps being critically received, with many being skeptic after a lengthy 25-year development period. However, by all accounts, it seems to be a success, with the engine having been test flown on several aircraft by now, and currently a firewall forward package for the RV14 started being developed in 2024, and its first flight was supposed to happen sometime around this video release, if it hasn't happened already. Their engine lineup has also expanded in the last year or two. Diesel power has also revived one of the best high-power aero engine layouts, which largely disappeared from aviation since World War II, which is the V12. And this is thanks to a new design from German company Red, called the A03. These V12s arguably make the older radials obsolete, if they weren't already, and especially for applications like crop spraying, where turboprops are often too costly to operate. With their diesel V12, Red is directly competing with turboprops in these markets, offering a much more fuel-efficient alternative. And with over 500 horsepower on tap, it's certainly no slouch. Their 6.1-liter V12 has a bank angle of 80 degrees with gear-driven dual overhead cams. It's a gear-reduced FADEC engine that can run on a variety of kerosene-based fuels. Next, there's the intriguing SR305-230E from French company SMA. While the name doesn't exactly roll off the tongue, this horizontally opposed direct drive engine stands out from the diesel engines we've discussed so far. It has individual air-cooled cylinders like the Lycoming and Continental Avgas engines. Of course, this means cylinders can be replaced without doing a full top overhaul, and on that subject, TBO is a quite high 2,400 hours. The SMA engine powered the Cessna 182 Skylane JTA, but it was eventually discontinued. STC development for the 182 as well as the Diamond DA50, which is still in development, seems to have stalled, leaving the future of the French company uncertain. There are several other diesel aero engines on the market, and I plan to cover some of them in dedicated videos. But it's clear the diesel aero engine market is thriving, and if my suspicions are correct, will continue to grow. What do you think about the rise of diesel aero engines? Let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.